Well, United Airlines is finally permitting some of its employees who defied the company's vaccine mandate to return to work this month, sort of. Last year, 2,200 United workers who received medical or religious exemptions were put on unpaid leave or moved to non-customer facing roles, and those are the employees who are going to be coming back to their regular roles. But some other 200 employees who were fired for refusing to comply with the mandate, who did not receive an exemption, are not going to be asked back.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon has asked the Supreme Court for permission to stop the deployment of unvaccinated Navy SEALs. In January, a federal judge suspended the Biden administration's vaccine mandate for SEALs, and the decision was upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Joining us now to discuss renewed rumors is Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill, and Emily Jashinsky, culture editor at The Federalist. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.
So, Emily, it feels like a lot of the vaccine mandates and other things are now falling by the wayside, that we're finally getting to a place where there is broad social acceptance, I think even in Team Blue circles, that we're kind of done with COVID. Is it going to be like it never happened, like they never, tried to require everyone at every level, as much as they could, vaccines and other things? Are we just going to kind of memory wipe that from the collective imagination?
Yeah, no, we absolutely are. Whether that's successful is a different question. They have been trying to do this. We've seen Randy Weingarten, for instance, try to do this intensely. It is very, very intentionally a revisionist history effort. It's political, and they will be helped by the media. Now, that may not mean that it'll be a successful effort, because I think this is pretty deeply ingrained in the memories of a whole lot of voters and a whole lot of people in general. So I don't think that they'll necessarily get away with it, but they will have the help of the media in sort of smoothing out their own record, because they are now being sort of the reasonable actors and letting the COVID emergency measures sort of melt away. They can say that they were leaders in restoring normalcy. But I think a whole lot of people, if not most people, are not going to forget. I feel like this was a political awakening, actually, for a lot of people who suddenly started paying attention to what was happening, even on the local level. So I don't know how successful they'll be actually at getting away with it.
You know what's interesting about this, the United story, and them saying that they're going to accept back the employees, the over 2,000 employees who actually received the religious or the medical exemption versus those who didn't, is that, with these exemptions, they're on a case-by-case basis. It's like, if you're lucky, then the person who reviewed your papers decided yes or no. It's so arbitrary for so many people. The people that I know that received them, even from the airlines, it was just totally arbitrary. And so for people to have lost their jobs and then they're not going to be able to get them back, it just feels. I always thought it was wrong from the beginning. But this part feels extra bizarre. Do you think, Julia, that there's going to be more companies who say, okay, we're going to start bringing back these people who are fired? I mean, we need employees. We need people to be in these industries. We have a lack of many industries, like nursing, for example. A lot of nurses and doctors were fired even after having natural immunity, but they still weren't willing to get the vaccine. Do you think that there is going to be more of this rehiring or bringing people back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of companies are learning, or at least looking at the companies that are now taking a lot of the unvaccinated employees back, are learning that it wasn't sustainable to get rid of them in the long term. I think the Biden administration, as well as a lot of corporations who were very pro-vaccine, pushing the vaccine, while the vaccine has been, fantastic for a lot of people, I think they underestimated how much pushback there would be from some pockets of the population against getting the vaccine. They didn't realize that it would be this big in numbers. So I think they're realizing that it's simply not sustainable to require people to get these vaccines in the long term when it comes to the coronavirus. I think there's the question as to, what sort of precedence does it set, for other organizations or institutions like universities, for example, where, to go to college, or most colleges in the United States, you have to get, a tetanus shot, for example. I think, for companies, though, and, the administration right now for the government, it just wasn't sustainable, or it doesn't appear that it was sustainable.
And Emily, I'm glad that United is going to take these workers back. I think they ought to take all of them back at this point. But the military one is kind of strange to me. So the Marines are asking for permission to be able to give an order to people in their unit. It's like, that's what the military is.
Right.
I mean, they get shot up with all kinds of crazy vaccines that you've never even heard of. And by the way, central to being in the military is getting ordered to do things that, you know, could get you killed. Like that's part of what's going on here. I'm not saying that I love that about the military, but that's what the military is. So at what other orders are the Marines going to have to ask the Supreme Court for permission before they can give them out?
It's interesting because I do wonder, and I was thinking this even with the airline question, without the mandates, how much of this would have existed. So like if people didn't feel like the government in many cases and big business was forcing them to get vaccinated, and in the case of the Marines, again, this is an emergency use authorization for the vaccine, and it is very new. And so for the mandates, I think that's what's I'm not saying this, like I'm just saying I think this is the argument. I think that really sowed a lot of distrust in people, the fact that something so new was being so forcefully implemented via mandates. And I do think that was the seed of distrust and skepticism that really prevented a lot of people from getting vaccinated. And so I actually wonder how differently a lot of this would have played out if there were, I guess, maybe a more reasonable strategy of getting people to take it, which was that like, hey, this will probably be good for your health. We're not going to jam it down your throat, and we're not going to jab you with the needle forcibly to make you keep your job. Because I think that was just, a lot of people were like, whoa, hey, why would you be forcing me to take this? And I can see that being a huge factor in the military, particularly.
Yeah, I think there are two things. I agree with you, Emily, and I think there's two elements of the vaccination strategy that really undermined that. The first was when the government went back on saying, you know, first it was you get the vaccine and then you don't have to do any of the other stuff. We just want you to get the vaccine. Then they went back on that. No, we actually want you to mask and social distance and everything. And also not recognizing natural immunity acquired from infection, not recognizing, as we now understand from the science, that you do have a pretty robust protection akin to the vaccine. Some people think it's better. Some people think it's not quite as good, but it's pretty good. And not recognizing that, well, maybe we don't need to, if we're going to require people to get vaccinated, well, we don't need to require them if they can show they have antibodies. And that really would have helped, I think, sell some of these policies, but they shot themselves in the foot. I don't know. What do you think, Julia?
There was definitely a lot of mixed messaging here, and I think it was very confusing for the public at first. You know, like you said, you get the vaccine. Do I still need to wear a mask in public places? Even going into individual businesses, I think there was frustration, and maybe still is sometimes. Like when someone goes into a restaurant, for example, there isn't a mask mandate in a city, and then a restaurant is asking you to put on a mask, though that is absolutely an individual business's right. But yeah, I think the mixed messaging from corporations as well as the government, and I would definitely specifically point to the government on this, led to a lot of frustrations. I think last year in 2021, we saw that once shots started going into arms in April and May, there was a sense of reopening and that we weren't going to go back. And then, of course, that all, that was dampened with Delta later that fall, late summer, and then, of course, with Omicron in November. So I think the mixed messaging coupled with the fatigue is just leading to frustration among the public. And I don't really know how much more tolerance they have for this.
Well, and also, if you're going to use a different strategy, by saying, well, we could, we encourage you to get it because of this, that, and the other, you have to actually mean that, rather than like Canada, where they said, well, we tried that and you still didn't comply. You didn't do what we really wanted you to do, and so now we're actually going to force you into it. So I think you have to mean it if you're going to go that strategy. Regarding the military, I just wanted to mention, the problem with a lot of people criticize like the military and the Navy SEALs and whatnot and say, well, you're required because, like Ryan mentioned, they're pumped full of all this other stuff anyway, and they're kind of giving their bodies to the government, might end up losing their lives in war. But the problem with that is, and I understand the argument completely, but the problem is that the military oftentimes recruits people who are poor, and they don't feel like they have other options in life. And so they're taking this opportunity to get a government job, essentially, to have some stability, and maybe to gain access to an education through the GI Bill. And so, they're already giving up a lot, maybe even they don't really want to, but they're kind of being forced to do that.
I'm with all of that.
Yeah.
But I think if you agree with that, then you've got to radically reevaluate the entire military, which I'm 1,000% for.
Right. So, but one final question I want to ask: now Pfizer has said you're going to need 4 doses of the vaccine. One area where they are still mandating these vaccines are in college campuses. Do you think that college kids who are low risk for serious COVID side effects or serious COVID outcomes, because many of them are so young, do you think that colleges are going to be requiring that 4th dose moving forward, mandating it even on an individual level? What do you think, Emily? We'll start with you.
No, I think no. I think it's already amazing that they continue to mandate the vaccine, but I feel like what happened over the last several months was that 4th dose and the 3rd dose became the sticking point for people who said, we're looking at the numbers. The numbers are very, very low. And here you've told us dose 1 and 2 would suffice. And then the booster comes along, and then you're suggesting maybe a 4th booster. I think what happened over the last several months was just they were testing the waters, and the waters were not warm. People were like, this is just absurd and ridiculous. And so I don't see any major institutions at least holding on to that level of a mandate for a 4th booster. And I actually think it's really interesting because that was sort of the sticking point, as I see it at least.
Julia, do you agree?
Yeah, I don't know about the 3rd or 4th shot. We'll have to see. But I think definitely a 1st shot or a 2nd shot being vaccinated, I think colleges and universities in the United States have a history of that. I think we could definitely see one of those initial shots being mandated really throughout educational institutions.
Well, Julia, Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
guys.
We'll have more Rising right after this.